How to Write a Damn Good Novel by James N. FREY. I'm going to go over some notes I took on this book, and hopefully they help you to learn how to write a novel, or a damn good novel. So let's start with the character. Who is your story about? The story usually is about one character in particular, the protagonist, but this protagonist can have other helper characters. There's also the antagonist and so forth, but the story ultimately centers around one central protagonist. Now, it could center around two, maybe more, but usually there's just one character. And there are two types of characters. There is the flat character and the round character. The flat character is a character that lacks depth. They could be a waiter, could be a chauffeur, could be a taxi driver. It's just somebody that's not three-dimensional. Now, the round character is a three-dimensional character. This is a person in the story who has a physiological dimension, a sociological dimension, and a psychological dimension. This character has height, weight, has a background, education, and so forth. Now, the author recommends writing a character biography. Now, there are a lot of templates on this, but one book I found in particular that really helps is this book, The Marshall Plan for Novel Writing by Evan Marshall. Now, throughout this book, you will see that it gives you various ideas on how to write for your character. On page 28 and 29, you see a character fact list. This includes age, appearance, mannerisms, personality, and so forth. I believe that this book will help you quite a bit in structuring your character. Characters spring to life when they are faced with some sort of conflict. This conflict or obstacle reveals who the character really is. It reveals their strengths and their weaknesses. The author says that story is struggle, and how a character struggles reveals who or she is. The premise. The premise of the story is a statement of what happens to the characters as a result of the core conflict of the story. The author says that this should contain a conflict and a resolution to that conflict. For instance, in The Godfather, the premise is family loyalty leads to a life of crime. There is no magic formula for a premise, although there are books that I believe that come close to getting it right. But you can use this book to help you develop that particular premise that you are looking for. What's a story? A story is a narrative of events. A narrative of events is a simple recounting or retelling of something that happened either in the real or fictional world. The character struggles with a dilemma, and this dilemma worsens into a crisis. The crisis rises to the point where there must be a resolution to the conflict. In essence, that's what story is about. It's about creating a situation where a character is in conflict and must resolve that conflict in a creative manner. Viewpoint. Now, this can be a little bit complicated depending on what your writing abilities are, but I will go through many of these. This is not an exhaustive list. This is just a brief summary. Objective viewpoint. This is when the narrator is outside of the characters at all times, writing as if he were a reporter. We are given nothing of what the character thinks and feels, what his attitudes are, what his plans are, and so forth. Objective viewpoint is used to give an air of mystery to a story. It's often used in detective novels and thrillers. Modified objective viewpoint. This is when the narrator does not claim to know the character's inner workings, but makes guesses about them. Sometimes the guesses prove wrong, resulting in what's called an unreliable narrator. I think the unreliable narrator is fun to experiment with. You should start off maybe writing a short story with an unreliable narrator. You'll have fun with it. First-person subjective viewpoint. The first-person narrator is always writing from a subjective viewpoint. The first-person narrator has access to one character, the narrator, who is himself a character in a story. He may be the protagonist, antagonist, or any other character. This is when the story is written in the first person, like I, me, mine. Omniscient viewpoint. Narrator reveals what is going on in all the characters' heads. Few novels today use this viewpoint. This is like the God viewpoint. Limited omniscient viewpoint. The author goes into the heads of only certain characters and not others. These are called viewpoint characters. Here's a good book to read on viewpoint. It's called Mastering Point of View. How to Control Point of View to Create Conflict, Depth, and Suspense by SHERRI, SZEMAN. Dialogue. Now, screenplays contain a lot of dialogue, but novels don't. There is dialogue in novels, but just not quite as much as in a screenplay. Now, a play for the stage contains nothing but dialogue. There are two types of dialogue. There's direct and indirect. Direct dialogue is on the nose. It expresses exactly what the character is thinking. Indirect dialogue expresses the will of the character indirectly. Now we turn to dramatic writing. Dramatic writing requires rising conflict, not only for the acts themselves, but for every scene. Every scene should have a beginning, middle, and end. It should rise and it should fall. The 3 commandments of dynamic prose. 1, be specific. Have a time, day, location. 2, appeal to the senses, like smells, taste, touch. 3, be a poet. Use figures of speech like personification, hyperbole, metaphor, and similes. Personification means giving human qualities to inanimate objects. Hyperbole is exaggeration. Metaphor is an implied comparison of one thing to another. Simile is direct comparison using like or as. Self-analyzing your story. Have you proved your premise? Have you shown that greed leads to unhappiness, or whatever your theme is of the story? Have you touched the reader's emotions? Have you evoked in them sadness, happiness, or whatever you were planning to evoke? Are your characters in opposition? Is there conflict between the characters, not just the protagonist and the antagonist, but other characters? Do your principal characters grow? This would be called a character arc. Like, let's say your character goes from being greedy, and at the end of the story, the character is giving money away, kind of like Ebenezer Scrooge. Do the events of the story grow out of one another? Does one thing lead to another and another and another and keep building? Does each scene have rising conflict? Like I said, each scene must rise and fall. It must start with a conflict and maybe not end with a resolution, but there should be some kind of implied resolution. In conclusion, I recommend that you give this book a try, Writing a Damn Good Novel. Now, there is also Writing a Damn Good Novel 2 and How to Write a Damn Good Mystery. So I recommend all 3 of these. But I also recommend these 2 as well. So you have a lot of reading to do. Thank you for watching. Bye.